there's a clutch thing that I've been using recently, and it allows things to work in your favor more often than not. And so let me introduce you to silence. Now, if you're like me and you have 2 young kids running around, I shouldn't say young anymore, they're kind of teenagers, there's never really much quiet in the house, and so you don't really have much time. And so I want to talk about silence in 2 ways. I want to talk about silence as a creative and how it's really important, and I want to talk about silence in a leveraging manner. And so this is a bit more higher level negotiation kind of shit. So, and you can use it in a plethora of different ways, which I really, really enjoy. So let's start with the easy one, which is, as a creative, you need to build silence into your days so that you can actually think. And there's a couple of ways that you can do that. The first thing you need to do is you need to clear your mind. How you clear your mind varies from person to person, right? This does not mean go and get blackout drunk and then that's your silence, because that's not true silence. What I'm talking about is sober, unmedicated silence, okay? What it looks like for me is I'll sit down, I'll have a coffee, and I'll write down a list of things that need to be done in the day. And then I'll sit there in silence, no music going, nothing, and try to let my brain figure it out. And it's something really magical that happens, because what happens is when your brain actually gets bored and there's nothing going on, is it has time to start sorting, and it has time to start looking at things and go, hey, this is a little cool. I should try and do this. And I find most of my good ideas come from times where I'm not doing anything, right? And you've heard this before, like, oh, I have my best ideas when I'm in the shower. I have my best ideas when I'm walking the dog. These are all true. These are all meditative moments in our lives. And so running was something I used to do a lot of, and I miss. And now that I've got some space between my climbing accident, I think I'm going to go back to it, because it really was a helper when it came to creativity and to business as well, which was, it gave me time to think, but not think at the same time. So I'm not actively trying to think of something. Because right now, if you have a problem or a task in front of you, you write it down and then you start thinking about it. But what I'm talking about is write this thing down and then don't even think about it and just focus on one task. That meditation of that task helps to go into this almost, I guess it's subconscious. I'd love to talk to someone who actually knows brain chemistry a bit better. But to have that ability to think about one thing, but not think about one thing all at the same time is a very powerful thing. So that silence that you create in your schedule, in your time, allows your brain to assimilate new ideas, to just make new stuff. And it's just really cool. And so often I'll put an idea out onto paper, but then develop silence so that I can actually go, if we did this, this would be really cool. And this client would actually really benefit from this, right? So my brain's always thinking. And so being able to force it into not thinking is something that is really tricky. And so for me, running was really, really good because it was really boring and there wasn't much going on. And over time, when you get comfortable at running, you've literally nothing else to think about. And so your brain starts processing things and giving you cool ideas and all of that fun stuff. So that's just one way that I create silence. The second way, remember I talked about how it's good for negotiations. This is more of a psychological thing. And so this is used with caution, because if you overuse it, you just look weird. And if you use it right, you can be a killer. And so here's what you do. When someone says something that you don't really want as an answer, by giving them a blank in the middle of the conversation, it allows for them to feel uncomfortable enough, because they're not used to the quiet, to fill the quiet with something. The quiet in the middle of conversations is awkward. And often the person who feels the most awkward will try and fill that gap. So if you're in a negotiation and you ask for a price, is a great example, and the person goes, oh, that's like $10,000. And then you just leave a blank. You leave a space. What will happen more often than not is they'll sit there and say, well, usually it's 10, but like if we do this, we can bring it down to 8. So just by simply not saying anything in that gap, you're forcing movement in that gap. Now, someone who's really strong-minded and has good negotiation tactics, this won't work on, because they'll just sit there and stare back at you because they know damn well what you're trying to do, right? And that's when you know you're playing with someone who already gets that negotiation tactic and it's never going to work against them, right? Silence is to make someone who isn't sure of themselves fold into what you want them to do. So use it with care. It's a very, very keen way of finding out how people are and what they are like. Because it's just, the silence is hard to do. It's hard, it's awkward, right? Like silence is a hard thing to kind of be in a conversation because you expect to have a back and forth. Okay, so use that one with care and use that one with smarts because it really does make a difference. And I've seen conversations where I've had, especially with my kids is a great example where, I'm quite sure that they're not telling the truth. Just by just holding that space, they'll fill the gap. And that'll give me more information than they were going to give to start with. So that's how to use silence for good and for bad.